Hey, we hope you're having a great day. I'm Tom.
I'm Holly.
And welcome to HBC's YouTube channel.
Hello and welcome to day 2 of Journey Through the Bible as we make our way through the book of Romans. We really hope you enjoyed yesterday's passage, and today we've got loads more insights to share. We're really getting into the meaty bit of this passage, so we hope you'll really look forward to that.
We want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been watching. We've been blown away by the amount of views we've got, and also through the feedback and people sharing with us what they think on the passages, and also on our other series as well. So we just want to say a big thank you from both of us, and let's just keep going. Let's keep supporting each other, and let's keep growing as believers together.
We love hearing your ideas. Thank you so much. Let's dive in with our passage for today. Romans 1, 8-17. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is being reported all over the world. God, whom I serve in my spirit in preaching the gospel of his Son, is my witness, how constantly I remember you in my prayers at all times. And I pray that now, at last, by God's will, the way may be opened for me to come to you. I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I planned many times to come to you, but have been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had among other Gentiles. I am obligated both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish. That is why I am so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith.
Right, so let's jump into the passage and see what God is trying to tell us through it. So let's break it down, verses 8 to 10. Immediately, when we read verse 8, we are met with the word first. Now, Paul often uses the word first throughout the whole of Romans. All of his points are firstly. And that confused me a bit, because it made me think, what happened to secondly, thirdly, fourthly, fifthly, sixthly, and so on? Maybe he hadn't been taught them. And then I looked in a commentary and found something a little bit more profound, which said that, he wanted to continue the same point. It was a continuous point. He didn't want to add other things in. He wanted it to be the same point throughout all of what he was saying. We move on. So we find out that Paul has heard of what is happening in the capital, and that the word is spreading, and that it has become almost famous-like throughout the rest of the world. And Paul is encouraged by this, and he wants to get involved, and he wants to continue the good work is there throughout the whole of the capital. Rome is the most important place in this Roman Empire, so it is the key for spreading it throughout the whole world as well. And then we move on to 9 and 10, and we find that Paul uses preaching and prayer as the most important thing in his ministry. It goes hand in hand in everything that he does, to preach and to pray. It's almost like it gives his preaching another level. It gives it the backup that it needs to make it so profound and so powerful, and possibly so impactful in the times.
So I'm going to be tackling verses 11 to 13. Now, verse 11 starts off with this statement from Paul that says, I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. I found this one really interesting, because you like I probably thought of this as gifts of God, maybe some spiritual gifts like the gift of tongues or something like that. But when I was reading the commentary, it was really interesting in the sense that it seems to be more of a practical offering that Paul is giving them. So this gift maybe is more like helping them to improve their preaching or helping them to improve their prayer life, rather than being gifts of God. And it's as if Paul's saying, look, I'm no magician, I'm not here to give you those gifts from God, only God can do that, but he's more offering them practical support. So he's quite unspecific about what he's going to bring to them, but maybe that's because he wants to wait till he's arrived to see what need that they have in their church before he offers that practical wisdom. I really like verse 12 as well, because it shows that Paul is really humble as well. He knows that as much as he's going to give out to this church, he's also going to receive. And he talks about the mutual encouragement that there is to be had between believers who are witnessing their faith to each other. So although this is Paul, the apostle, the incredible speaker and preacher, he's coming as much to receive as he is to give out. And I think that shows that even in the Christian world, that there's this emphasis that we shouldn't have statuses, that we shouldn't be one's more important than the other, that Paul was aware that even by sharing faith, he was going to receive something from this church as well. And verse 13 says that he wants to come now because the harvest is ready to reap. So this was interesting as well. So he's coming less for the church to see the fruit of their ministry, but more because he knows that Rome, like Tom said, it's new to this whole gospel. Everything is kicking off there, and he wants to be a part of that so that he's there to reap the harvest of new believers. So it's more an emphasis of new believers coming to faith rather than reaping the fruit of the current believers.
Now let's move on. Verse 14 and 15. Now what I find fascinating about verse 14 is the word obligation. Now not because I don't understand it or because it's a long word, but because it can also be translated as debt. And that's not in the sense that I owe someone a lot of money and I am indebted to them, but more in the sense that someone has given me something so valuable to look after that I am indebted to look after it. And we find out later that that is, of course, the gospel. We're indebted to look after it and also to share it with others. And we find out in verse 15 that when we share it with others, there is no division. There's no separate gospel for different classes or for different races, but it's the same gospel open to everyone.
So I'm going to be looking at verses 16 and 17 of this passage, so that brings us to our conclusion. So verse 16 is really interesting because it starts with that phrase, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And how interesting, given Paul's history, that he's saying that statement. If you think about Paul's past, he avidly persecuted Christians for what they believed. And so it's as if he's almost saying, oh, he's come full circle. This thing that he had so much contempt for, he's now preaching with so much passion and heart because he's met the living Jesus and has been completely transformed by it. So this gospel is transformative. It also shows that the gospel provokes so many different reactions from people. It's almost a bit like Marmite in our day. Whenever we read the Bible, we see that people respond in different ways. Some people view it with contempt, some people view it in awe, some people are confused by it, but it definitely provokes a variety of reactions. And it's as if Paul's allowing us to have a human response to sort of sometimes feel like, do you know what, do I actually want to admit to being a Christian? But to sort of to take hold of that faith in all its glory and all its essence, and to stand up and be proud and say, I am not ashamed, for this gospel is the reason I've received my salvation, and it glorifies God by showing that that's his power in action. And so I thought that was really cool. It's also, again, it reinforces what Tom was saying, that the gospel is an incredible leveler. It doesn't matter who you are, what status you've got, we've all been saved by the same thing. And Paul makes it so clear that we have been saved by faith. We've all come to salvation in the same way. And Paul has this conviction. It's as if he says, look, this has changed my life, and so I have to share it. And so it's almost like that declaration, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, is like him saying, I'm so unashamed of it, I'm going to have to tell everyone about it because it's completely transformed my life and my view on the whole gospel. So I think it's a really interesting thing that it really encourages us to share the good news of Jesus. Verse 17 focuses a lot on the righteousness of God. And it's as if God is summed up as being the one that delivers justice. So he is the just one, he's the king, he's the one that lives out justice and sort of has that benchmark and that immovable standard that he upholds. But he also shows himself to be sacrificial, because as well as having that justice that he upholds, he also justifies us through his son Jesus. So through that sacrifice, we have been justified in order to meet the expectations and the standard of that justice that he maintains. So it's really interesting that sacrifice is encaptured in that phrase, the righteousness of God. And finally, that phrase that he uses, faith to faith. In other words, that we go from strength to strength, and we encourage our faith and grow in faith by living it out day to day, and we get through life by living every experience faith by faith by faith. So we understand now what it meant in its context, but what does it mean for us today? Now, there's loads for you to go off and explore, but one thing that really stood out to us was Paul's conviction in sharing the gospel. In verse 14 he says, I am obligated. In verse 15 he says, I am eager. And in verse 16 he says, I am not ashamed. And perhaps for us today our application is, sometimes in our contemporary churches and as modern Christians we're a little bit reluctant to evangelise, and maybe we see it as something that we can opt in or opt out of. But I think in this passage Paul makes it so clear that it's absolutely the obligation of every Christian. And it's a bit like what Tom was saying, that it's not because we owe God something, but because God has entrusted something of such value to us, and that it would be wrong of us to just keep that to ourselves. So maybe this is our chance to be a little bit more like Paul, and just to have that sheer passion to share the gospel and to tell everyone the transforming power that it's had in our own lives.
But as we always say, it's not about us. We want to hear from you. So again, the usual, you can leave the comments in the comments section below. You can email us, you can post on one of our social medias. But don't just be a spectator of this. Get involved, get sharing, and let's be church together and really encourage each other. So we'll see you again tomorrow. See you then.